It's simulation time. I'm Alex Marchand, author and artist of The Universe is Virtual. Today's subject, the 5 virtual reality options. Number 1, the Matrix option. In the Matrix movie, a virtual reality looked real to its inhabitants because they only knew it as information, just as we know ours. When Neo disconnects from the Matrix, he falls back into another world to see post-nuclear machines feeding people virtual input while farming them in vats for energy. The physical world he previously knew was a construct created by programs in another physical world. In theory, this is possible as by the Church-Turing thesis, a finite program can simulate any specifiable output. But in practice, trying to simulate even a few hundred atoms with a conventional computer would need more memory space than there are atoms in the universe as a whole, and would take more time to complete the task than the current age of the universe. There are potential workarounds for the seeming impossibility and just plain inefficiency of computing the entire universe in all its detail. It is proposed that perhaps the world is only rendered to players and only to the level of detail called upon by the players. Everything not rendered just exists as probability. Evidence suggests that such a scenario could be accurate, but further experimentation is required. Even if true, ending up in another physical reality like the one we already seem to be in would just push the unsolved questions to another layer. If we are brains in vats, that still doesn't tell us how the brains in vats really work. That brings us to option 2, the pure simulation option. In the pure simulation option, the physical universe is the output of a universal program, as implied by John Wheeler's It from Bit. The program creates a physical world, but its base is either non-existent or irrelevant. In this view, below physical reality is an information reality. In a pure simulation, consciousness, and thus mind, would have to be a product of evolved code. Otherwise, if consciousness comes from outside the simulation, then the simulation is like a multiplayer game, and so there is still some sort of external mind to consider, like in the Matrix option. In multiplayer games, characters not played by people are non-player characters, NPCs. If the simulation is a multiplayer game, are some residents NPCs? If humans are all real players, what about dogs, plants, or rocks? In the purest simulation option, inorganic material evolved into the first cell, plants, animals, and then us, in an unbroken chain. So when was consciousness added? Is everything just pixels, or did someone have to play a rock for 1,000,000 years? A world simulation must explain all basic physics, including space, time, light, energy, matter, spin, and charge, to be scientifically valid. But there is no guarantee that sufficient information about the code running the simulation is accessible from within the simulation. Even if the world is a simulation, such an axiom still raises questions about the larger reality. Is there just one simulation, or is it simulations within simulations within simulations leading to perhaps infinite regress? That brings us to option 3, which has the most scientific potential since it should at least be falsifiable. The quantum realism option. In this view, proposed by information scientist Brian Whitworth, there is just a quantum reality creating a physical reality interface. In physical realism, the physical world is real and the quantum world is imaginary. But in quantum realism, quantum processing generates physical events as a virtual reality and the physical world is just an interface. This view is compatible with science, logic, and all the observations and equations of physics. A quantum computer as big as our universe could create the physical universe as a virtual reality. In the quantum realism option, quantum events predict physical events because they cause them, and physical events are indeed only generated when we look and thus observe, just as quantum theory says. Since every physical observation requires an observer and an observed, either A, the observed matter is real, and so it creates the observer, or B, the observer is real, and so the observed is the derivative. Physical realism assumes the first, Cartesian dualism tries to make both true, and quantum realism is that the observer is real and the observed is not. In processing terms, the quantum world is both sink and source of the physical event interaction. Conway's free will theorem states, if any part of the universe has free will, it all does. But if any part doesn't, then none of it does. So if an electron is mechanical, we are too. Or if we are conscious, so is an electron. These are the only options. So in quantum realism, everything is conscious, even a photon. A virtual reality requires an observer to exist before it starts, so quantum realism requires consciousness to exist before the first event. We evolved thoughts like I, but to suppose that consciousness requires thought is perhaps an error. In quantum realism, everything is a free actor observer. Empty space is full because it is a null program. We are the programmers, and matter is light condensed. Quantum realism predicts that extreme light will collide to create matter, contradicting the standard model rule that bosons can't collide. When physicists start colliding light, this theory will be tested. Next is number 4, the universal mind option. In this view, a universal mind is having a multi-hallucination that feeds many user dreams. The advantage of this option is that we are experientially aware of the ability of the mind to dream and make up a reality where its own projections are made to seem as separate and other. The mind virtualism of the universal mind option is similar to other virtualism options, except that it is presumed that mind is the computer computing the universe. That means mind is primary, and so special magical mixes of information or matter are not required to make mind. Instead, special magical mixes of information or matter are simply required to limit mind so it can cut itself off from itself into discrete characters. In that sense, the seemingly material world would be like a curtain made to hide the dream's source, and thus maintain the dream. From a scientific standpoint, universal mind is probably too big of a concept to be falsifiable. Any and all virtualism options could be at least somewhat true if mind is ultimately the computer computing the universe. That's because a universal mind could choose to run a universe many different ways and at many different levels. Mind virtualism begs many questions about the dreamer. Who is the dreamer exactly? Where is the dreamer? What's the point of the dream? And why is the dreamer dreaming this dream instead of another? For instance, why would a great mind dream the nightmare lives of murderers and drug addicts? Do mind fragments reincarnate? If so, how does that work? Is the universal dream a means of evolving the universal mind, or is the concept of evolving merely a thing of simulations? In which case, is the dream a mere nightmare from which we simply need to awaken? Perhaps if we stopped trying to measure the universe and instead started to psychoanalyze it, we would be able to answer such questions. And that brings us finally to number 5, the oneness realism option. In the oneness realism option, which is outlined in my book, The Universe is Virtual, anything that is multiplistic is virtual and thus illusory. Oneness realism is not a theory about what kind of virtual reality we inhabit, but is instead a theory about what is real as opposed to virtual. All attempts at explaining the universe fall into 2 categories. They are either recursive, leading to loops, or they regress, leading to infinite regress problems. The only way out of those traps is pure monism. That's what oneness realism is. Oneness is not simply presumed as an ideal, but as the ultimate reality. In oneness realism, reality can at best be described from within any simulation as oneness, and nothing more can be said of true reality other than that. In oneness realism, multiplicity cannot be infinite, and so all simulations are necessarily finite. Oneness, by its nature, cannot be modeled and still be oneness. You can't have two onenesses. In oneness realism, all simulations are doomed, ill-informed, finite attempts to model oneness. The fact that there can't be two or more onenesses while maintaining oneness is the very thing that makes modeling oneness a doomed proposition. Since simulations are by their very definition non-oneness, they necessarily are born of division, leading to choices, leading to opposites, leading to conflict. To run a simulation is to run divisions like love, fear, life, death, dark, light, on, off, and so on. Within simulations, oneness is modeled as temporary pockets of union relative to that which is separate and other. We cannot make any judgments about what oneness is from within a simulation, since oneness is the only thing that cannot be modeled. Oneness is completely foreign to simulations. Therefore, perhaps questions like what is reality can only be answered in oneness, since only in pure oneness can such questions cease to exist. So those are the virtual options in a nutshell. I intend to explore these options in more detail in other videos. What virtual reality option do you prefer? Maybe you prefer a mix, or maybe you instead prefer the antiquated models of physical realism or dualism covered previously. Ultimately, what you choose as your preferred reality model reflects your preferred objectives. Do you want to improve the universe, make it worse, destroy it and yourself, or would you rather escape it? Do you want the universe to be the only reality? Do you want there to be many realities? Do you want there to be no reality? Or do you want there to be one reality of oneness? Don't be a non-player character. Make your case known in the comments below, and help make the YouTube algorithm smarter while also motivating me to make more videos by liking this video and subscribing. Finally, check out the link in the description below to purchase The Universe is Virtual, where I reveal my proposed hack for escaping the simulation sooner rather than later.